All right, back with another tier list. You know how this works at this point. We can just jump into it. You see the teams that are already on the board. Those are teams that either have yet to play this week or don't play this week. So if you want to hear why I have them in their respective spots, you can simply just watch last week's episode. But yeah, let's get into it. Starting off with the Titans, who, again, they were bad last week. Going to stay in the bad tier this week. Even though it wasn't an awful game against the Chargers, they certainly didn't feel like the better team in that one. But, it wasn't a disaster. Kind of went as expected. Will Levis able to make a nice play or two, but it's just not enough for this Tennessee team, unfortunately. The Jets, who, I keep trying to not criticize them as much as I want to sometimes, because it feels like there still is talent here, right? It just does. But if you're not playing well, who cares if you're talented, right? I put them in solid. I had them all the way down to scrappy and was considering putting them in bad. They beat Houston. I bumped them up to solid. That was an overcorrection. I'm going to keep them in scrappy, and they could easily be in the bad tier as well. I mean, they're just playing horrible. And Aaron Rodgers didn't even play well last week. Usually I think you're getting some stuff with him, but not in this game. What a mess the Jets are in, and their defense stinks. So, yeah, really tough situation. Then we have these Cincinnati Bengals who lose again. I still feel like this is a talented team. I have them in solid last week. I think I'm going to keep them there just because, this defense still is giving up way too much. But I mean, Joe Burrow's amazing. Jamar Chase is amazing. Unfortunately, they need more than that. And they will get a little healthier. That'll help. But still, that's an issue right now. Jaguars, I mean, if Trevor Lawrence isn't here, this is a bad football team. I had them in scrappy earlier because I thought Trevor Lawrence gives you some stuff, and there are some talented pieces across the board with this Jaguars unit, but their defense played well against Minnesota. Got to give them credit for that. But if it's a Mac Jones-led Jaguars team, I was talking about how I think this, Lawrence is getting a bit too much criticism, and this situation around him is horrible. When I got Mac Jones in there, not feeling super optimistic about how Jacksonville can continue to go about things. The Lions are next, who looked like they were going to get blown out by the Texans, have that great second half performance, pull out a victory. I think you could look at the game two different ways. You could look at it and say, well, Jared Goff struggled, and, it's concerning that he can have a game like that. And yes, not every interception was his fault. One was a Hail Mary, all that stuff. It's still fair to say he did not have his best game. Is it concerning? Could that pop up in a playoff atmosphere? Well, this is a playoff team that you still beat despite the 5 interceptions. To me, that is more of an optimistic thing than a pessimistic thing. You can win in different ways, and even with, that awful first half, finding a way to pull out the victory, winning the special teams battle. They're obviously still Super Bowl contenders. I think this is a good thing, to be honest, although I get why people are maybe a little concerned. The Vikings, who, I think I could be really mean and drop them down out of Dark Horse. I think that would be an overreaction to Darnold's disappointing performance against Jacksonville. This is another thing where it's okay, for Jared Goff, they had enough stuff around the team to beat a good Houston team. For Minnesota, when Darnold had a day like this, they barely had enough to beat a not very good Jaguars team. So this team around Darnold is very good. A lot of weapons. It's the Darisaw injury sucks. It just does. But you still have a lot of weapons. They do. And their offensive line, I think, still should be able to pass protect all right. They have a good, obviously really good secondary and really good defensive coordinator. So all that stuff is good. If Darnold's going to play like this, though, I don't know. They can't win 4 playoff games with Darnold playing like this in one of them. They just can't. They need Darnold to be first 4 weeks Sam Darnold and not this kind of thing. But again, this was his worst game of the season. It's not fair to pretend like this is who he is. Hopefully it was just a blip for the Minnesota Vikings. But yeah, we can move on to the Buccaneers, who I'm still going to keep in the solid tier for now. I know that they keep losing, but they are losing to good teams and losing in competitive ways, although really, I mean, with how much of San Francisco's issues were special teams, Tampa Bay probably should have won this one, but they're so banged up. They're going to start to get healthier. They lost Tristan Wirfs, but now they're starting to get Mike Evans back, so that should help going into the bye. I'm not willing. I think it's Baker Mayfield's having a great season, and they have Mike Evans coming back, I'm not willing to completely say this season is over and a really easy schedule, but that's where I view them right now. The 49ers, I had them in feels like playoffs. I'm going to keep them there. I think Brock Purdy played really well. George Kittle played really well. Jawan Jennings played really well. And Ricky Pearsall starting to, again, getting shot and missing the first half of the season. It's going to take him some time, but, it seems like he's starting to become a part of the offense. Had a big touchdown in this one. And I think the defense is very good as well. Special teams is an issue now for San Francisco. It's been an issue all year. They need to get better at that because this game could have slipped away from them because of special teams. So, they got to figure that out because, their record isn't great. They have to work on getting – they're not in a playoff spot right now, but they feel like a playoff team. I think they'll get in. Atlanta, yeah, disappointing loss to the New Orleans Saints. I think I'll still give them feels like playoffs for now. This is where I had them last week. I know it was a disappointing loss, but the divisional matchups, weird things happen. We have seen the Falcons offense look really good, and even the star players showed up in this one. Cousins needs to protect the football a little bit better, but yeah, as a whole, it was it was not the end of the world. I think because of the divisional matchup and stuff, but certainly one they feel like they let slip away. So can't have too many more of these because even though, I brought up Tampa Bay, even though you have the 2-game cushion and a tiebreaker, meaning that you should feel pretty good, the schedule is a lot tougher for you than it is for Tampa Bay. So while I still think Atlanta is the one that's going to win the division, they can't let too many more of these happen or then it becomes a question. So yeah. Baltimore, again, being able to beat Cincinnati in a very close game, but beating them nonetheless, beating them twice this season. They're Super Bowl contenders. Lamar Jackson is making them Super Bowl contenders. Their defense isn't really playing well enough to make you feel great about them winning it all, but granted, every team in the league has an issue right now, so it's not fair. I wouldn't freak out too much about that personally, but yeah. Playing really good football, especially offensively. And, how much of the defensive issues is simply they had to play the Bengals twice. That's a factor. The Bears, who I had in a solid tier, I can't put them there. I can't even put them in scrappy. I'm putting them all the way to bad. What a mess right now, right? They have been playing solid football up until this point. I don't think I've had a team, at least not after the first couple weeks, drop multiple tiers after a game, not because of injury. But I feel like I have to. This offense is just abysmal, and even the defense, it's playing well, but it's not being as smothering as it was early on. Maybe it's just because the offense is giving you nothing. But this was a bad defense they played. Spoiler alert for the Patriots. This will confuse people that were using the bottom bar to skip ahead. But I'm gonna put the Patriots also in the bad tier. The Patriots aren't a good football team. But the Bears losing to them and honestly not even looking competitive. Again, guys on the offense can't get on the same page, whether it's the offensive line knowing how to block or the receiving core knowing what routes to run or Caleb Williams knowing where his receiving core is going to be, where his players are going to be. There is so many issues with this Bears offense. It's a mess. The Patriots, mention them real quick. Drake May being very inconsistent so far, but has shown some flashes. I still don't think this is a great football team, but starting to play better, and who knows, maybe they can, again, start to come together and play a little bit better team football as this season progresses, which is something we've seen Belichick teams do. Obviously, Belichick no longer there, but maybe we'll see something like that happen. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys. Without Dak Prescott, get crushed. Probably not going to have him back. Maybe not this year. Certainly not anytime soon. They're a bad football team. We talked about how rough this Cowboys team was. They were in the scrappy tier with Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And those are, say what you want about them, clearly the two most important pieces of this team. You get rid of those two guys. I guess Micah Parsons as well. But I'd probably put those two guys as number 1 and 2, just I think positional value wise. But you remove those two guys, this is tough. Cooper Rush did not have the gain that we've seen him have in previous years because there isn't that much around him. Yeah, it's a tough situation here for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know what you do to get better because you're paid all those guys big money. There's only so much moves you can make. The Texans are a very fascinating team because this game was going to be we slept on the Texans too much. Look at what they were able to do, shutting down this Lions defense. CJ Stroud looks awesome. And then the second half comes around, and pretty much everything is flipped. I still would say this was a very good performance by their defense. Even in the second half, it's not like the Lions were just like moving on the field at will. They did have a couple of nice drives, but they're the Lions. They're going to do that. Even those nice drives, I thought, were contested by Houston. So, that was very good by the Texans. Defense played well. Offense didn't get anything going in the second half. The Lions defense was able to smother them, and the question just is, like, I mean, to me, I said this on the podcast, and it's how I agree with it, which is people are saying, is this even a playoff team? I don't know if it's a playoff team without Nico Collins, but they're not going to be without Nico Collins for the whole season. He is going to come back. That is going to change some things. So I'll give my evaluation with Nico Collins because I think he's going to be back soon. So again, sometimes I with injuries, don't factor in what you are now. Sometimes I say what you still will be when healthy. I'm still going to keep him in the playoff. It feels like playoffs. I thought CJ Stroud played well in this game. Obviously, can't turn the ball over there, and those are ones that I'm sure he's thinking about now that they did end up losing the game. But yeah, I mean, there's still some good stuff with this Texans team, but got to start playing better. They do. The Jets loss was a lot worse, though, I think, than this Lions loss. Lions are very good. The Colts, man, I mean, the bad tier might start to get crowded. Maybe I have to break this up or just bump a couple teams up. But really, some of these teams don't feel like they belong in scrappy. I mean, Joe Flacco turned the ball over, 4 times in this game after getting named a starter because Richardson kept turning the ball over. Now, I still think Flacco gives you a better, does run the offense a little better than Richardson, even with these couple games included. I mean, again, it's tough because prior to the past 2 weeks, clearly Joe Flacco was the better quarterback than Anthony Richardson. Unfortunately, you put Flacco in, and now he isn't, right? So it changes the decision of if the question was, will we get a significantly better quarterback by going with someone who really doesn't have any hope of having a future here with this team and Joe Flacco, we're still going to do it because it's football. We want to win games, right? Sure, makes sense. Even if I know in Madden it's not necessarily what you would do. But the issue is now, if it's not a significant step up, do you just say, well, let's go with the younger guy, because if it's not significant either way, let's at least give the guy who might have a future if things turn around. And we saw with Bryce Young, who we'll get to, has looked better since sitting out a couple weeks. There's other issues with this Colts team. I do like this receiving core. Downs has to make that catch. Would have been a touchdown early on in the game. All that stuff. But defense was able to actually make some plays. And we've seen them start to make some plays, but need to make a little bit more given how their offense has been playing. You know what? I'm going to actually bump this team up to scrappy. Maybe that seems weird, but the quarterback issues aside, I think there's a lot of talent in this team. But they have those quarterback issues. Maybe it'll turn around. Maybe Flacco will turn around, and then they'll be, you'll feel better. But I feel okay with them being in scrappy, actually. I feel like they're a little better than some of the teams that have in bad right now. So that's why I review them. The Chargers, I mean, they're continuing to win games. They have a very specific brand. I don't know if I can put them up the dark horse. Feels like playoffs is where I had them last week. I think keeping them here feels about right. I don't know what I learned from that game, really. I said on the podcast, that game definitely feels like it could have been an email. Very much went as expected. But, hey, that's a good thing. You have a brand. You can win games a specific way, and you're doing it. So, yeah. Washington, who I had in dark horse in previous weeks, they lose to the Steelers, but I'm going to keep them in dark horse. I think that this is still a very good team. Yes, the Steelers were able to rattle Daniels a little bit, but I thought Daniels also made some nice plays in this game as well. I mean, a lot of young quarterbacks do not survive that situation against Pittsburgh. He was able to do it. Unfortunately, they did let the game slip away from them at the end. I still don't know if, with Lattimore, it changed the defense. Do they have enough depth to cover guys one-on-one? I don't know. But you get Lattimore in and fully integrated into this defense, it does change things, and I think could make them even better. But for now, dark horse is where I have them. Next up is the Kansas City Chiefs, which, listen, I don't care how bad they look. If you're the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champs who are undefeated, you're in the Super Bowl contenders tier. That seems like the easiest choice in the world. That being said, we can't just say that and have that be the end of the conversation, right? It is fair to say this team looks like they have issues. They do. And this offense just isn't rolling the way that we saw it even play last year. And I know people like to say, well, look at how bad they looked last year and won the Super Bowl. You can't do that every year. Like, there are going to be years where you don't look like a superstar team and then you don't win the Super Bowl. That being said, like, even though they keep winning these games close to teams that, like, listen, we'll get to Denver in a second. Denver is not a bad football team. Like, Denver is very much in the playoff race. Like, it's not like they're barely beating, the Raiders. They blew out the Raiders, right? That being said, they probably should be winning these games by a little bit bigger of a safer margin than on a last-second blocked field goal is what you would think if you're a Chiefs fan. But they've also beaten really good teams. They've beaten Cincinnati. They've beaten Baltimore this season. Sure, maybe you could argue those two teams have gotten better since then, but you could argue the same thing about the Chiefs. This defense still is really good. I still have some concerns about the secondary, right? But, like, it's hard to count out this Chiefs team because they do have the stars, and I think they're really well coached this season. This has been a great coached year by the Chiefs. So definitely some issues. They're definitely not perfect, but they're still a very good team. The Saints, who beat the Atlanta Falcons, I'll bump them up to scrappy, I think, right? This was a scrappy win. I had to bump them down to bad after their Panthers loss. But, Marquez Valdes-Scantling getting over 100 receiving yards. I mean, who would have thought that, right? Although Carr does have a great deep ball. We saw it again. Maybe Carr just took a little bit of time because he didn't play well against Carolina. It's possible it just took him a little bit of time to fully get back. That's possible. He's playing well for every game he's been in this season with the exception of one, and that was the Panthers game. Able to make some plays, and the Falcons can't rush the passer, which I didn't really bring up feels like when I talked about them in feels like playoffs, but Falcons can't rush the passer. If he can't rush the passer against the Saints, gives Carr time to throw, and he's going to usually make that work. The offensive line isn't great, so I don't know how often that's going to happen this season, but yeah, a good enough win. I'm willing to bump them up a tier. The Giants, this is one of the more obvious ones. They are in the bad tier, losing to the Carolina Panthers. Kyle on the podcast was blaming Daniel Jones a lot for this. And listen, I'm not saying Daniel Jones is the answer. I don't think it's all his fault. But they do obviously need to move on. If you cut him after this year, only owe him about $20 million more, then you can kind of finally wash your hands clean of this mess that they find themselves in. Again, there's some nice pieces. They have a few nice players, a few good young players, but yeah, they need an overhaul here. I think the Giants should get a good draft pick. The Eagles with another dominant win. Again, how much do you take away from them being able to crush the depleted Cowboys team? I don't know, but I still think it was a dominant win. I still think this team is looking really good. Jalen Hurts is all of a sudden looking way better than he was. A.J. Brown helps, man. He's a good player. He matters a lot for this team. Yeah, I had him in dark horse. I'm going to keep them there. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, as I said, got a big win against the Washington football team. Can I consider, let's just play this out. So I had them in dark horse last week. Can I consider bumping them up a tier to Super Bowl contenders? This defense is playing awesome. Russell Wilson's doing some nice stuff. I know that there are some issues as well, but I think he's playing well. The deep shot stuff, adding Mike Williams, is very good. I don't think I can quite go there just yet. I think dark horse feels fair. The Steelers have a very specific brand of football. And, it kind of felt like for years past, they had to win in a very specific way. They had to kind of make the game ugly and then beat you with experience in playing ugly games. It seems like that's not what they have to do now. Like, this isn't a game that they win in the previous few years, even though they kept having above 500 records, right? Now they're winning this game. Now they do have an ability to come from behind in a situation like that. So that's interesting. I still think the other teams are a little better. I still think it's fair to keep them in dark horse, but I'm buying into the Steelers team. I really am. The Broncos, who play the Chiefs tough. I mean, it's one of those things where everyone plays the Chiefs tough, right? Everyone nearly beats the Chiefs, but they nearly beat the Chiefs. I mean, it came down to a blocked field goal. Like, they were right there. Got a block better on that field goal try. I mean, offensive lineman got blown up. What are you going to do? But, can't let that happen. But as a whole, this defense is really good. Bo Nix has played well this season. There's a lot of good stuff with this Broncos team. I still don't love their receiving core. So, I've been keeping them in the solid tier. That's where I'm going to keep them again. You could definitely argue they are a feels like playoffs team, but I'm not going to have them there just yet. The Carolina Panthers, are they doing enough to be in the scrappy tier? No, they are not. I'm still going to keep them in bad. But, they're in the conversation. Win another game, they can definitely potentially get brought up to scrappy. Bryce Young's looked way better since he's gotten benched. He hasn't looked great. I think that's fair to say. Like, he hasn't been lighting the world on fire. I think his game was better than his numbers would suggest. His numbers weren't very good at all, but I think he actually played all right. Again, you have to mention, generating a couple turnovers in the red zone. How often is that going to happen? I don't know. Getting the fumble on the first play of overtime. How often is that going to happen? I don't know. But hey, they're making plays at the same time, and his defense just looks better. It might just be the Giants, but they look way better than they were to start the year. So, yeah, still not a great football team, but looking more and more competent at the very least. The Arizona Cardinals, who, Cardinals fans have been getting on me this season because I was a little bit, I think, confused about who they were. They, early on this season were, I think, a bit up and down, and now we're seeing them just play good football. And one of the things that, Kyler Murray's been awesome, which we knew was a possibility going into this season. I would still say, you look at last year, he did have, the really good game and then kind of the underwhelming game. And even this season, we've seen a bit of that. But we've seen way more really good games than underwhelming games. And usually the underwhelming games are just, him still playing all right and just not being needed as much. This defense has kind of completely turned around. And listen, they haven't given up a touchdown in the past 3 weeks. They're not going to not give up a touchdown the whole season. I still think there is fair questions in terms of some of the talent on this defensive roster. But you know what? They're well coached. They're in position. They're contesting these catches. They might not be perfect the plays on each of them, but they're in position to do so, and that gives you a chance on a lot of these plays. So I had them in feels like playoffs, and I think is that too low? Can I really bump them up to dark horse? Let me talk this out, because again, I do love so much of what this offense is doing. I think I'm going to give it another week. I think I want to see it one more week, but I am close to putting them in a dark horse team. Feels like playoffs. They definitely feel like a playoff team. They're playing awesome right now. Finally, the Buffalo Bills, who, I think would have liked to win this game more handedly. I know it ended up being a double-digit victory, but it took a while to get there. This game was competitive for a good chunk of it. But at the same time, winning by double digits is not easy to do in the NFL. They were able to do it. Again, Josh Allen did not have his best day. You expect better from him down the line, and you'll probably get better from him down the line. So, yeah, that is the tier list for Week 10. Week 10, we're really getting there. Season's almost over already. Feels like it just started. But, yeah, fun stuff going on. We'll see what happens Monday night. And, maybe next week I'll even start doing my playoff predictions Monday morning videos as well. We're starting to get to that time of the year. But, yeah. Those are my thoughts on all this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.